Okay. So let's move on to the Sixers. So let me start with the Sixers. I think with the Sixers, of these three teams, if they of the three teams, if they are firing on all cylinders offensively, the Sixers have the highest offensive ceiling, right? Because um with the Bucks, you have Giannis, and there's a pretty big drop off from Giannis to Jrue in terms of an offensive perspective, right? And with the Celtics, you have Tatum and Brown, and then there's a significant drop off into your next offensive player. From Embiid to Harden to Maxey and to a lesser extent Harris, there's much more at the top end, more offensive talent, especially they're clicking on the Sixers, right?
Right.
So I think that's what they have going for them. They also probably have, in terms of the best all around offensive player, they probably have that in Embiid. Giannis is probably the best overall player, but I think Embiid has the most offensive skill sets and counters and everything, right? So that they have that going for them. Um, they have experience as well, right?
Yep.
Harden has a lot of playoff experience, and Embiid has a fair amount. Tucker has gone to the finals. He's won a championship with the
Bucks.
Bucks. The Duck was voted a top 10 coach of all time. He's
Fine.
gone to the finals twice. He's won once. A lot of playoff experience there. They have a lot of experience, right?
Yep.
Um, this, but and this is a big but. Or there's multiple buts. One, it's hard for me to trust that your best defender is 38 years old and he can withstand the defensive responsibilities for 3 or 4 straight playoff series, especially when you get into the later stages of the playoffs when you have to play the best teams. Like he has to guard whether it's Tatum, whether it's Giannis, whether it's Brown, or if they pay the Cavs, he's going to have to guard Mobley and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
I don't I don't trust that Tucker can stay healthy or stay relatively effective on defense consistently for 2 months. And other than perhaps Melton, there's not really a perimeter defensive player on this team. They they can the Bucks and the Celtics can really pick on
Backcourt.
almost everybody on this roster, other than Embiid, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But so that's one concern, and this is their perimeter defense, right? Harden and Maxey are going to are going to be cooked, right? Especially if they play the Celtics. But for me, I just don't trust Harden in the playoffs. Like I just don't like he's had so many terrible closeout games. He's had so many 2 for 11 closeout games. Um, if you look at his numbers when the series is tied or when his team has been down in a series, his shooting percentages are in the mid 30s, depending on how you cut the numbers, right? So I I am so hesitant to rely on the Sixers when your second best player has such a tremendous history of not performing in the playoffs.
Right.
Uh, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh wait, I didn't hear. I didn't quite hear. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. No, Harden had many, 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 many playoff opportunities. When he played for the Rockets, right? I'm not gonna hold it against him when he was in OKC. He's still very young. I'm not gonna hold that against him. It's fine. But when he was the main guy in Houston, he's went to a few Western Conference Finals, couldn't get it done. Even I remember there was a Houston series with the Warriors without KD, which was probably his best shot at making the finals and even potentially winning a championship because the team that came out the East was the Cavs. With just LeBron without Kyrie, if I'm not mistaken, right? It was just LeBron at that time. Yeah, in 2018. Yeah.
Yep.
So he couldn't even capitalize on that opportunity. And there was also that one game when they were leading the Warriors at halftime. That was that series that Chris Paul got hurt, and they like went on and like missed how many threes consecutively? Like 20
I
something.
believe it was 19.
Oh, it was 19 consecutive threes. Which honestly, if they just made any other shot, they probably would have made at least like five. Like, like that might have won them the game, right? It's crazy because they had the lead too, despite at halftime, despite missing all those threes. But he's got a long history of floundering in the playoffs. So unless he proves us wrong this season, he's gonna be hard to trust. In addition to that, I think ultimately outside of Embiid and as you mentioned, Melton, and you have a decent like guys who are pretty good defensive players from the off the bench, like Jalen McDaniels, who's solid. But everyone else is kind of like shaky on defense, which ultimately, even though the numbers don't suggest it, I think because I think they are one of the top defensive teams statistically.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like playoff matchups against the top Eastern Conference teams, they might have a tough time dealing with them because like they're like as you mentioned, like their best defender is probably like PJtucker, and he's 38.
Yep.
So I mean, how he's not going to be able to continuously hang with the guys like for that long. Even if like even if the other teams don't have a big man, for example, right? It's going to be tough for a 38-year-old to consistently, unless you're LeBron, to consistently like guard big men.
Yeah, like hypothetically, if they play the Bucks, I am easily picking the Bucks for multiple reasons. One, and I didn't even bring this up earlier. The number one rebounding team in the league, the Bucks.
Oh, I brought it up earlier.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
All good.
But to bring home the point, the third worst rebounding team is the Sixers. So
surprising when you have a guy like Embiid.
Yeah,
but then again, like they only have like a bunch of threes.
because basically like because they have Tucker playing on the perimeter so much when Embiid is on the floor, and when Embiid is off the floor, they have Tucker at center, so they can't rebound, right? So that's one thing. And if they are playing the Bucks, not only do the Bucks have the Bucks average almost 10 more rebounds than the Sixers, dude. And I have no problem trusting Holiday to guard Harden for the entire series.
Oh yeah,
Holiday
absolutely.
is still in his prime. Harden has lost step.
Yeah,
that's just
anymore.
Quite frank.
He can't get his calls anymore, right?
Yeah, so like no one can stop Embiid, but no one can also stop Giannis. They can just take turns, but overall, more rebounds equate to more possessions.
Exactly.
And with the Bucks, I feel confident that they will have more possessions than the Sixers. They will out rebound them. They can contain to a certain extent their second best player because they have Holiday. I feel like if the Bucks played the Sixers, and the Bucks would probably win in 6. Personally.
Yeah, I just think the defensive that just no one on the Sixers who can really stop anyone. To be honest, I mean, again, as we mentioned, like for the defensive stats come from primarily Embiid, like carrying.
Yeah.
Right, and maybe and Tucker, like for the most part, like obviously not playing these guys, the top guys every single game. So you're still gonna have solid games against lesser teams to boost up your stats, right? But like in a playoff matchup, it's gonna be tough. And I think one thing I wanted to mention regarding the Sixers is Tobias Harris, who they extremely overpaid, and he's not really efficient and really helping them, at least on the stats wise, and also if you watch the games, he's kind of like
he's a very
he's a very player. Yeah, he's like undersized for, which isn't bad in today's game, right? As long as you can shoot or play defense.
He basically does nothing well, but he does nothing bad either. He's literally like he can score a good amount. He can shoot a good amount. He's an okay defender. He's makes the right reads here and there. He's professional. He plays relatively hard. He's a very, very good player, but
But that's
he's
not going
not
to move the
gonna
needle.
he's not
And
gonna
then
move the needle exactly.
and in addition to that, what he to some degree from a contractual standpoint, right? The Sixers are paying him a ton of money, which and I don't think any team is going to want to pay him. I just want to make sure I got to check his.
Yeah, they picked him over Butler basically. But the good thing
Yeah,
about that is by the time Harris's contract ends, because next year is his last year of this big contract, um, that's when you can utilize that money to pay Maxi whenever if you intend to keep Maxi, right? So not
yeah, but you're
terrible.
still missing out on. I mean, he's not bad, but the thing is, it's just he's not great either. And
Mm,
ultimately, if you're going against the top teams, he's not necessarily going to be able to add
yeah,
that much. And
yeah,
even as like the starting four, right? He's only averaging like what 5.9 rebounds right now, which is
yeah.
pretty low for a guy
Oh,
who plays a ton of minutes.
yeah. Oh, and just to kind of reiterate that point, another weakness of the Sixers is they don't have a lot of depth.
Yeah,
Montrezl Harrell has not been a good player performer for the majority of his career, especially recently, right?
yeah.
So that's why they're forced to play Tucker at backup five, which is going to burn him out. They don't really have, other than Melton, they don't really have any backup guards is consistent. Daniel House doesn't play that much.
Or forward.
Yeah,
Honestly, it's just like a lot of no one really
yeah.
plays that well except maybe like
Niang
McDaniels.
has like a good game every 1 out of 3 games.
Yeah, he's a pretty solid shooter. But that's about it. I think McDaniels they just
Yeah,
is like the only solid guy, and then Milton's usually coming off the
yeah.
bench if Harden's playing.
Yeah,
So
and same with Korkmaz. He's kind of like he also is one of those players that has one good game out of three.
he also doesn't want to play for the Sixers. He requested a trade.
That too. So yeah,
Not
so
really motivated to play there either. So
yeah, so I question their depth, and I feel like without depth, it'd be hard for them to um
I mean,
make
Shake
a
Milton's
long
also
player front.
solid, but again, against the two teams atop the East, they just have better depth.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Anything else on the Sixers before we move on?
I mean, at the end of the day, they're still playing well because of Embiid. He's
Mhm.
more or less. I mean, obviously with Maxi and when Harden's healthy, he is contributing as well. But like outside of those three players, uh, I mean, it's going to be tough in playoff matchups against
Yeah.
the other top two teams. Oh, sorry, the other good teams in the East. Like it's not just exclusive the the Bucks and Celtics, but I would even argue against the Cavs because the Cavs do have a good front court that
Mhm.
can kind of contest and go against Embiid, right? With Allen and Mobley.
Yeah.